You can do it. Today is our forms training. It's Monday, so we are continuing along on our forms training. We are covering the modification of terms form as well as the cancellation of listing. So the MT and the COL are the two forms that are today. I'm just situating my windows real quick, because once I hit share screen, it messes up all of my Zoom windows, which seems silly to me. But let's hop in. So our modification of listing, buyer representation, or other agreements. So this form is what we use. So if you go in looking for modification of terms, you're not going to find it. It used to be called modification of terms. And then recently, last December, they changed up the name on it. So you'll never find it again. You can search MT, which also doesn't make sense because I would assume it's MOT, modification of terms, but it's not even that. It's MT for modification of terms. Terms is no longer in the title. So just search modification. Remember, sometimes if we go to search for a form, if we put in what we think is the full name and things aren't popping up, try just backing off a little bit and searching a broader term like modification. So this form would be used to modify a listing agreement. So we want to make changes to that, our on market date, our list price, our expiration date, anything in there, the commission, that would all be done on this modification of listing form. If we want to make changes to our buyer representation agreement, maybe we originally signed it at a commission and the seller is offering less and you want to make an adjustment so your buyer doesn't have to come out of pocket for that, you could do that there. Maybe you want to extend the term of the agreement, change the area in which the buyer is searching for properties or you're able to help them. That would all be done on this form as well. So any form that you have that is an agreement between yourself and the principal, either the seller or the buyer, whoever's your client, so you and the client, gets done on a modification of listing, buyer representation, or other agreement between principal and broker. It's one of the only forms that is signed just by the principal and ourselves. So just kind of keep that in mind. At the top here, you're going to mark it for either. Yes, Anastasia, you have a question?
So where you have between Realty One Group Fox, does the broker have to be in that spot or is it our name?
It's the broker.
Okay.
Not our name. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Because remember, their agreement is with the brokerage and we're representing the broker as an agent. So anytime you see the word broker there, that's where the name of the brokerage needs to go. You're going to check the box, either listing agreement, buyer representation agreement, or other. So if it's in reference to an other document, we would check that box there. You're going to fill in there. And then you're going to put the date on the upper, usually left hand, it could be right hand side of the first page of that agreement. If you're referencing an agreement that does not have a date on the first page, just remember it's the date that it was originally signed. So you can go to the signature blocks to find that date there. Here, as Anastasia pointed out, it's going to be between the broker, which in our case is Realty One Group Fox. It really should be like this, though, just so you know. My computer just really isn't participating with me today. It should be Realty One Group Fox. There you go. All right. And then you're going to put your principal's name. So this is either going to be the buyer's names or the seller's names, whoever you're representing in whatever form it's modifying. Regarding the real property, manufactured home, or business described as, if this is, you're modifying the buyer agreement and there's no specific property, you could just put no property identified or TBD, to be determined. If it's a listing, obviously, then you have the date or the property address already there. On that property address, make sure that you put in the full property address, the number, the street name, the street suffix, right? So your street, drive, road, way, court, whatever that might be, city, state, zip code, it should all go there. Okay, when you click on it, it gives you a spot for all that information. But some people leave out the suffix, which is important because, again, there could be like a 123 sample street and a 123 sample court. So it's important to put that suffix on there. There we go. All right, next, if we're changing the listing price, we would fill out this information here. If we're not modifying the listing price on a listing agreement, we just skip this one. Okay, I'm surprised that they haven't put little check boxes on this so that you can identify terms that you're changing and terms that you're not. But if we're not making any changes to the price, we're not doing a price adjustment, we just leave it blank. Same thing with the expiration date. This would be the expiration date of either the listing or the buyer representation agreement, the BRBC, the buyer representation and broker compensation. We could change that expiration date either forward or backward. Okay, totally up to you, whatever you're doing. You would put that there. Okay. If we're making any other changes besides the list price or the expiration date, they're all going to go on the other line. Okay. One day, my guess is they're going to come back and like modify this form a little bit more. But until then, this is what we've got. Note on the listing agreement, if it's an exclusive right to sell, which is the listing agreement that we're all supposed to be using in our office specifically, this or a seller reserved listing for residential property improved with 1 to 4 units. So residential property improved, meaning it's actually got a house on it. So if it's vacant lot, this doesn't apply. Or if it's got more than 4 units, doesn't apply. The renewal may not last longer than 12 months. This restriction does not apply if the seller is a corporation, LLC, partnership. It is unlawful to record or file the listing agreement or memorandum or notice thereof with the county recorder. There was a company that was doing that previously. They would make like 6-year listing agreements. They would record them against the title of the property and lock that seller into never being able to sell with anybody else. All right. The amount of rate of real estate commissions is not fixed by law. They are set by each individual broker, each broker individually, and may be negotiated between principal and broker. Real estate commissions include all compensation and fees to broker, right? So just our default language that we're seeing more often on all of our forms. And then here's where you would fill in the other terms. So anything else that you wanted to change, you wanted to further clarify the area in which the buyer is searching or the properties, or expand the area that the buyer is searching in on that BRBC. We want to change the on-market date, right? We might have a listing date, and then we said not to post it in the MLS. So now we're ready to get it in the MLS. We might want to clarify what date it's going to be listed for sale to the public. There on the other line, there's so many options there, but you would just fill that in. Keep in mind too, that if there's something that you're using all the time, you can save it as a clause. So if we click on clauses, and then you wait patiently for Amy's computer to participate, here's where your personal clauses are going to be. And you could create a new clause there. So you could, anything that you find that you're doing. So like an on-market date, we would just hit create clause. And we would say public marketing. And then here you would say property to be marketed to the public beginning on BEGIN. I think I need 2 double letters there somewhere. There we go. All right, beginning on, and I'm just going to leave it blank and hit save. Okay, that's going to save it to my clauses, and I've got this public marketing one. So if I want to input this, I just click here. I click, oh, let's see here. It should, hold on, there we go. Here's how you do that. So I went over here to clauses. You could probably like click and drag it on, but over here, we're going to hit add clause. Once you click on the line, I'm going to go down to personal. I'm going to hit public marketing and hit insert. Then it automatically populates that in there. So I don't have to remember the verbiage. You could save these for Avids too. So you could go in there to your Avid clauses and create Avid scuffed baseboards or whatever, and create clauses in there so that you can select them for your Avid. If you're not going to do it on Glide, just throwing that out there. But here, property marketed to the public beginning on, and then I would say 6/8/2024, right? So whatever that date is, you just put it in there. But now I don't have to type that first part in. I remember how I did the wording on it. Comes in handy, especially on those purchase agreements. This is where the seller's name would go. If this was a listing.
Amy.
Principal is your clients. Yes, Adriana.
Do you have to write that in for a listing agreement?
No, absolutely not. So if your listing agreement was filled out appropriately and the date was on there, if it's not going in the MLS within 24 hours, you filled out a CELM that had the appropriate date on there, then you do not need to do a modification of terms because you've already got it spelled out. If you didn't know when that property was actually going to go on the market, they were doing some repairs, cleaning up, whatever that might be, and the date had changed, or you just threw a date at a calendar and picked one with hopes that it would fall in there, and now we need to change it, that's where you would change it. So if we did a CELM, oftentimes when I sign a listing agreement, if I'm not sure when the property is going to go on the market, I would put on the CELM, like, do not market the property to the public during the entire listing agreement, just so I'm covered of, like, I don't have to worry about that date. And then once we get closer to going on the market, you would do a modification of terms for when it was going to go actually live in the MLS. So you do need one to clarify that date if it's not the appropriate date on your listing agreement.
If we're just doing like price improvement or extending the listing date, we don't have to write anything on
Oh,
there.
yeah. Nope, you don't have to write anything on there besides just putting whatever that price would be or whatever that expiration date would be, the new expiration date. So you can do all three of these line items independently of each other. You might just be coming on just to do the expiration date. You wouldn't need to do anything else. If we were just doing a price adjustment, we would just fill in the price without filling in anything else, or we could just fill in the other line. Or you could fill out a combination of all three. You might have one that, hey, we're doing a price adjustment because we signed the listing agreement 2 months ago. We've relooked at comps. Here's what we're actually going to go on the market at. It took longer than anticipated to get the property ready for market, so I need to extend that expiration date. And I'm going to clarify when we're actually going to start marketing to the public. So you might fill out all three, or we might just fill out one out of three of those things. So you've got all the options there at your fingertips.
Okay.
Okay. Sellers' names go here. Your information goes here. So this would be the brokerage name, Realty One Group Fox's DRE license. This is where your name would go and your license number, and then you would sign it. Now, keep in mind, if we have more than 2 sellers, we would need to use an additional signature addendum, an ASA form for the additional signers. So on all of these forms, there's only a max of 2 signature lines for either the buyers or the sellers. If we have more than 2 parties, 2 principals, it needs to go on an ASA anytime we sign documents. Any additional questions regarding our modification of listing, buyer representation, or other agreement between the principal and the broker?
No, ma'am.
Fabulous. All right, our next form that we are covering is our cancellation of listing. It's a COL form. See, this one has the O in there. Why doesn't the modification of terms? I don't know. Why didn't they change the name of it when they added to it? But anyways, cancellation of listing, COL. This is specifically exactly what it's for. We only use this if we're canceling that listing agreement. It gives us a cancellation form to use. If we're canceling a, hold on, we're gonna go into forms. Give me just a second. We're gonna hit add. Maybe. All right, we're gonna go forms library. So if you need to add a form, just so you guys know, in case you haven't navigated through the new signing editor, you should have. It's been there for a long time now, but you always had the option of using the old one. I'm always surprised at how many agents I talk to that didn't use the new one until they were forced to. But you can add forms to your editing by just clicking up. So on the cancellation of listing, you put the broker's name at the top. It has entered into a written listing agreement. This would be for a lease listing or other. For the most part, you guys are just going to have listing agreements. So you're not going to check any of these boxes. Here would be the date of that listing agreement. So that's that date that's printed in the upper corner of that listing agreement. And here's where you would put the principal names. Usually if they're already in your transaction, they're going to auto populate there. you can just click on when you click on that, there's a drop down. Usually your sellers are going to be there. Okay. And we could change this to the seller one. Okay. This would be the property address. Same thing as the last form that we talked about. Make sure you put the full and complete property address in there. City, street address, city, state, and zip, and make sure on that street address that you are putting in the full suffix. So street, road, drive, court, whatever it might be. Broker and principal agree to cancel the listing and terminate their agency relationship, duties, and responsibilities with and to each other, subject to the terms and conditions specified below. We have options when canceling these contracts. So one is you could go A or B or both. Okay, so it says A or B or both may be checked. Principal agrees to pay broker the amount of compensation specified in the listing. If prior to the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, principal enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property, right? So this is, hey, like we're canceling this, but still until the end of that expiration date, you're still obligated if you sell that property to pay me a commission. Okay, so that would be if we check box 1. So I would say for the most part, we're probably going to check box 1A. 1B is if within blank calendar days after the cancellation of this listing or the listing period specified in the listing, principal enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer property to any person named below or that person's related entity who, after the commencement of the listing and prior to this cancellation, physically entered and was shown the property by broker or a cooperating broker or submitted to a seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. Whew, that's a mouthful. So in our listing agreement, we have the option to check that box and to fill out dates there on the listing agreement. Those just transfer over. So if we filled it out on the listing agreement and said, hey, 90 days after the listing period, anybody who saw it during that listing period, I'm due a commission, we would check that box here. We're going to fill in the same number that matches that listing, the listing agreement, or if it's in within 90 days or the listing period specified, right? So if within 90 days, calendar days after the cancellation of this listing, or the listing period specified in the listing, so whichever is more appropriate or longer probably, principal enters into contract, right? So the other thing that we have to do per our listing agreement and per the cancellation is in order for this to be valid, we have to provide the seller a list of people that saw the property. So it's super important if we have hosted a open house on the property that we ask the agent that hosted the open house for the names or the last names of the buyers that passed through that property. It's important if somebody showed the property that you get the names of their buyers at some point. And, you know, it may be that, hey, I call back in history and be like, hey, Anastasia, who did you show the property to? They're in the process of canceling the listing and taking it off the market. And per my listing, I have to show that I have to provide them names of all buyers who passed through the property. This one's going to be difficult. This was a change that they made previously that it's become more complicated because we have to provide the names of people who passed through. It used to just be like a blanket. If they sell the property in 90 days after the cancellation, then we're due a commission. Now we actually have to prove that they passed through the home. So I'm not really sure the best way to go about that. In fact, I keep meaning to look on showing time to see if when they schedule that showing, if you can make it a requirement to enter the buyer's like suffix and last name. So it's like Mr. and Mrs. Carnahan, or, you know, whatever it might be, so that we have record of who passed through the property. I'm not sure the best route. So I'll continue thinking about that, but it's definitely something that we should be doing and something that we need to figure out how to communicate appropriately to other agents where they don't feel like we're going to poach their clients from them, because that's what agents think. So anyways, here's where you put the names of all of those people that passed through the property, or you could put on attached documents dated whatever 3/2024. Okay, so you could put it there if there's not enough line. Keep in mind too that if we do a text overflow here, let's see here. Let's see if we can get it to go to a text overflow. All right, so there we go. I'll show you what that looks like because it didn't all fit on that line. It should flow to a text overflow addendum, which you're not going to see here. You would just be able to see that text again if we clicked on the box. Then you can scroll through your lines of text. But I'll show you what that looks like when you go to print it in a minute. Okay. In the event of a transaction specified in A or B above, broker has no obligation to represent the principal in such the transaction, right? So if they decide to sell it and we've canceled this listing agreement, I'm still due a commission, but I don't have to represent them in that. Compensation is payable on close of escrow, or if completion of the transaction is prevented by default of the seller on seller's default. Okay. Principal 2, it only applies. So this all A applies if checked only, B applies if checked only, and then obviously C and D only apply if either A or B or both of them are checked. Okay. If we don't check either of these boxes, then none of these things apply to this cancellation. Okay, 1 doesn't apply. So we have to check either 1 or 2, or it could be, you know, we could just check A, we could just check B, or we could check A and B. Okay. Principal agrees to pay broker blank percentage of the listing or if applicable sales price, whichever is greater. If prior to the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, principal enters into a listing agreement for the sale or lease of a property with another real estate broker, and principal enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property during the listing period specified in the listing or any extension thereof. So this says, hey, we don't expire until the 31st of December, and you're agreeing to pay me, who knows? It could be anything. It could be the full commission that you asked for originally in your listing agreement. It could be a reduced. It could be, hey, I'm due a 1% commission if you sell this property at any time before the end of the listing period. Okay. So you've got that option as well. Again, this is negotiable. Principal agrees to notify the other real estate broker of the compensation obligation of this paragraph and pay broker such compensation upon close of escrow. Compensation is payable on close of escrow, or if completion of the transaction is prevented by default of the seller on seller's default. Okay, so that's your second option there. Principal, and you could check, you know, you're not limited to checking either boxes under 1 or 2. We could have both of these checked. We could have this checked. Hey, we're due a commission here. Here's the commission that we're due. Principal agrees to notify. We already did that. Compensation is due payable. I already covered that. 3 is principal agrees to pay broker blank for out-of-pocket expenses, cost incurred, and services rendered in marketing the property prior to the cancellation of the listing. So here, if we're saying, hey, you can cancel, but we had a cancellation fee in there of $1,000 to cover my costs, we could throw that in there as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Principal owes no compensation to broker. So if we didn't check this box or this box or this box or this box, this here would be the clean cancellation. We're canceling. Principal doesn't owe me anything. It's an amicable cancellation. Move on with your life. I'm done with you type cancellation. So no compensation. Okay, if any of these other ones are checked, notice when I check this box, all these go white. So I can't actually check them. And if I check a box up here, I can't check this box. So just kind of keep that in mind. Where you can't check 1, 2, or 3 and 4. It's got to be either 4 or nothing. Okay. And then 5 is your other line. So if there's something else that you're going to put in there as a provision, you would put it on the other line there. Okay. Questions about sections 1 through 5 there?
No, ma'am.
Fabulous. All right. Other than as provided herein, broker and principal mutually release each other from all obligations under the listing and from all claims, actions, and demands that each may have against the other by reason of the listing. However, broker and principal agree that the dispute resolution and attorney fees provision of the listing agreement shall control any dispute arising out of this cancellation of listing. I acknowledge that I have read and understand this cancellation of listing and have received a copy of it. And here's where the sellers would sign. You would sign down here, make sure you put the appropriate license numbers in there, and then that cancels the listing per these provisions. Let's see here, if I go and hit download I'm gonna go single file. I just wanted to show you what that text overflow addendum looks like. All right, let's see if it's downloaded. All right, it probably looks funny now on my screen because I'll have to reshare it here in just a second. All right. Let's see if it gave us our text overflow addendum. I'm going to reshare the screen, new share. I'm working on it, guys. All right. Chrome. I want to share this one here. This one. All right, we're just going to share desktop one. I'm sure it'll pop up. All right, here was that modification of listing because I just downloaded everything I had open. Here's the cancellation. See here, it says see text overflow addendum car form TOA paragraph 1 because I put too much text here that fit in those lines. So anytime you put more text than it'll fit, it always rolls to a text overflow addendum. So here is, and this one is the text. You can't see it. Oh, let's see. Stop share. Let me try again. All right, let me try sharing a new one. Give me just a second. All right. Take two. All right. Nope, that was not the right form. There we go. All right, can we see the form? Let me reopen the chat window. All right, if you can't see it, let me know. Oh, I got a thumbs up. Fabulous. All right, so go back here on this form right here, I put too much text that fit on these two lines here for the names of the people included that had seen the property. It automatically goes to a C text overflow addendum car form TOA paragraph 1. Then as you scroll down, you'll find the TOA. This is the text overflow addendum number 1. Now keep in mind here, my computer, our car forms, I won't say my computer because it's not, but the car forms is really smart for the most part. So see, it attached the seller. This is the TOA between the seller and the brokerage. See how it's not seller and buyer? If I was an overflow on the Avid form, I went over those, then it would be between the seller and the buyer. But this is the cancellation. So it's smart enough to say, hey, this was between the broker and the seller. So it's got us there. Here's where it put all the information that I had typed in on those lines that did not fit. Oh no, Michelle, you still can't see it. I don't know how to fix it.
Black screen with like squiggly lines.
So
now we can
weird.
see it.
All right, let me try again. Hold on, we're going to do this one more time. I'm going to share the different screen and then move it, thinking that maybe this will help. All right, we are going to share desktop number 2. Let's try that. Then we're going to move you up here. All right. How about now? Who wants to unmute themselves and let me know if you can see it?
Yes.
Anastasia, you say, yeah, we're good?
Yep. So far.
All right. All right. Fabulous. All right. I'm going to scroll back up. We're going to do this take number 3. Maybe Abby will edit all the mishaps out. We'll have a blooper reel for today's. All right. So on the cancellation of listing on these 2 lines, I overflowed the text. There was more text than would fit. And it automatically, see, it references the text overflow addendum. So it took all that text. It's going to put it on another form so it all fits in one place. This happens too if you go over on like a counter offer too, it'll go to a text overflow addendum. And then we come here to the text overflow addendum. And as I was pointing out previously, see this one's between the seller or the housing provider and the brokerage. So if it was an overage on a counter offer or an overage on the Avid, we went outside of the lines. We had more text there than what fit. Then it would be between the seller and the buyer. Carforms is pretty smart, so it figured that out all on its own. I didn't have to do anything for it. And then here's where it put all the text that was on those two lines that didn't fit. So it's going to fill out all that information for you. And then that would get signed just like it would seller sign, and then you sign as the brokerage. Okay. Again, if this was like on the Avid or the counter offer or something like that, or a text overflow addendum because it didn't fit on the TDS or something, then it would be that it would give a place for the sellers to sign and a place for the buyers to sign. So this is transaction specific. So that's how that works there on as far as the text overflow addendum. So any questions about the modification of terms or the cancellation of listing forms? All right, fabulous. Just for kicks, I'm going to pop back up here since we're sharing that screen. Give me just a second. I'm going to bring my other window back up. Maybe. There we go. All right. Now it went to a little, it did something funky here because that's what my computer does. Can you see the form on the screen that I've got my car forms open?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure my computer's keeping up with me at this point. All right, so if we go into our forms library, I believe there's one other form that's specific. I was just looking to see. There's the additional signature. Nope, you have to use either the modification of terms. I was thinking there was an addendum that was between the buyer and the broker, but you would use the modification of terms or the cancellation listing. And if the modification of terms, those lines aren't big enough, again, it'll pop up that TOA, the text overflow addendum for that as well. And if you were curious, because I mentioned the ASA, the additional signature addendum, I think I've talked about this previously, but we'll bring it up again just so you can see it. So this is if you had more than one or more than two either principals, so whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, if there's more than two of them, we use this ASA form, the additional signature addendum. And then keep in mind here that it could be the person's identified in paragraph 3 or additional signatories to the residential purchase agreement, the listing agreement, or other. So this form can be used for between any parties. They have so many boxes that you can check. So just so you know, so if we had a listing agreement with 4 sellers on it, I actually had one time that had 5 sellers. So if we had 4 sellers on our listing agreement, we were going to cancel that listing agreement. On the cancellation of listing, 2 of the sellers would be there. And I usually ask my sellers, like oftentimes when you have multiple sellers like that, like 1 or 2 of them super active in the transaction, the others just go along with what everybody else says. So I usually try to put the ones that are the most vocal or that I talk to or that I ask the question to as the main signatures, and then the other ones are the additional. But here is where you would put, who is this between? Is your principal the buyer, the seller, the landlord, or the tenant? For the most part, it's either going to be the buyer or the seller. So in this case, I was saying that it would be the seller. It would be in addition to the residential listing agreement. Even if it's a cancellation, it would still be, well, so the original one would have been the listing agreement. A lot of times I just check other, and I use the same ASA form. Once I fill this out, I use the same ASA form for the entire transaction, and I just come and change the form. So here, this would be the COL. So this would be the cancellation of listing form that we were referencing. And then that's what we do anytime. So if we're filling out the purchase agreement, keep in mind that there's other documents with that purchase agreement. So let's say you had multiple buyers. Now this is bonus information. I'm probably going to confuse you here in a moment. That's okay. On the residential purchase agreement, you've got the agency disclosure, the wire fraud, the California Consumer Privacy Act, the Fair Appraisal Act. You've got the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. You've got the buyer's inspection advisory. There's so many forms on there. It would really be inappropriate just to check this box. So here, if it was if we were writing an offer and there was more than one buyer, I would put in here the agency disclosure, the PRBS, see the FBAC, the BIA, the California, right? So it's got those all in there for you. There's a new one about the commission now in there as well, probably. So anyways, so I just put the acronyms for all those forms on there. Okay, if it was the listing agreement, it would be the same thing. You've got the agency disclosure, the wire fraud, like there's all those additional documents. So instead of necessarily checking, and it looks like now it didn't used to, it'll let you check 2 boxes. So you can check the listing agreement and then check all the other forms, and you would fill those out here, what other forms are going out with that listing agreement, and then put the date of that agreement. So on this now I've changed it. So I'm doing the COL form. The COL is being filled out today. So it have the 3rd on there. This is where you're going to put the full property address. You're going to put the, on this line here, this is where your sellers' names are going to go. Seller 1 and seller 2. And this is where all of the names go. So it would, I've told you there was 4 of them on this one. So we're going to go seller, seller 3. Oops, I can't spell seller. It's all right though. Seller 4, right? So you put all the sellers' names on there. We're marking the box that those represent the sellers. Here is where we would put Realty 1 group box. And we're going to check the box for broker. Now, keep in mind, this is going to get signed at time of listing, and anything between me and the seller as the seller and the broker. And then because there's 4 sellers, anytime they're signing something with the buyer, I need a secondary one of these that's going to have the seller box checked and the buyer box checked with the buyer's names filled out. Okay. By signing below, the undersigned acknowledge receipt of the documents identified above and except as specified below agrees to the terms, conditions, representations, and disclosures in this document. So here's the additional signer. This one's a seller. This is where we would put seller. It gets really confusing when you have like seller 3, when you have sellers that are then entities as well. Don't even get me started on that. So we would put them there. If it's an entity, you would put the name here and their title. So if they were like 5 co-trustees or 4 co-trustees, it would be seller 3 co-trustee. Okay. And then here we have 4 sellers. So we're going to check this box as well. And we're going to put seller 4 there. Well, we're not even going to end it. And then 5 here. Now there's multiples of these forms. So if you have more than 5 sellers, you would add another additional signature addendum for sellers 6, 7, and 8. Okay. I just hope that you never have more than 5 sellers or buyers at one time. But there is that form. And then each seller is going to sign here on the signature line. Okay. So that when you pop it up to auto populate, it'll set up the signature in that. Oh, it's right here on the signature line here. Boop, 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 right here at the bottom. So seller 3 is going to sign this signature line right above B, and seller 3B is going to sign the signature line right above the C. Okay. And that's how that works. And then that way they're acknowledging that they've seen and received this form. So that's how that works if you have more than 2 sellers. Any questions on any of those forms, the modification of terms, cancellation of listing, or that ASA form? All right. Fabulous.
Yes, I do. I
Nope.
have one quick question.
Nope, you missed your opportunity. Go ahead.
I missed my window. Okay, so when you have this
Uh-huh.
and you're doing your listing, you're doing your purchase of your RPA,
Uh-huh.
do you have to put a box for each one of these guys to sign on every single document?
So technically you do not. However, if you're with Realty One Group Fox, for compliance purposes, we don't need a signature, but we want an initial. And if you're using AuthentiSign versus Authentisign actually has a new thing. I'll show you. It's super cool. We go in here to prepare for signing. So technically you don't need a signature or initial on everything else from sellers 3 and 4, but for compliance purposes for our office, we do. So I'm just going to call this signing name here. We're going to call it a modification of terms. Or we're just going to leave it alone because it didn't want to change. All right, it's going to refresh the page. Well, that's rude. How rude. All right, hold on. Because I'll show you the really cool thing that they have now. Let me go back out.
Mine
It's
was
angry
giving
at-
me issues too this morning.
Say that
It
again.
wouldn't let, mine was giving me issues. It wouldn't let me prepare something for signing. It was giving me an error.
That's sad. All
I
right, well,
know.
hopefully we don't have a problem, so I can show you this really cool thing. Otherwise, I'll just tell you what they have and you'll have to go find it later. I did touch on it a couple weeks ago because I found it and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but hold on just a second. Maybe not. Okay, there we go. We're getting there. Dun, 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 dun. All right, let's come down here to those documents. In case you ever have to close out like that again, you don't have to go back into the editing either, because I know people are trying to figure out the new system. So if we're going to use Authentisign or DocuSign and we want to select multiples, we would just click the little boxes here for the modification of terms, the cancellation of listing, and the additional signature addendum. Then you go up to the top. I'm not sure if it kept those. And you go up here to e-sign. I think it's going to make me select them again. Here we're going to call this modification of terms. See if it opens. Do, 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 do. All right, I think we're going to have success here. All right, so normally you can go straight from the editing into the signatures, but here I'm going to add participants. I'm going to add from transaction. I'm going to add the seller 2. I'm going to add myself as the selling agent. And that's all I'm going to add for now. I'm going to hit select. Well, here, let's just go this. We're going to add participants. Add new. I probably should have selected those. Here's where we're going to have seller 1. We're going to have save. Oh, it doesn't like it because I don't have an email. Fake email at youtube.com. Maybe it won't red flag me. Oh, and the role is, oops. If you select the role when you add signatures to here, it will automatically assign them. We're going to hit save. All right, so there we've got seller 1. Oops. We're going to, hold on. We're going to skip that for now. I'm going to hit add participants. I'm going to go back to add from transaction, where I'm going to add myself and the seller 1. Oh, seller 2. I already have seller 1 on there. Hit select. There we go. Listing broker, Amy, assign. All right. And then if we hit add participants, hold on, we're going to add new ones because we have seller number 3, seller 3. Oh, and the seller role here is seller 3. Hit save. Really upset with me. All right, and then one more, add new seller. Number 4, seller 4 at youtube.com. All right. Oh, I still need to select the seller role. And then save. All right, so now I have all of my signers assigned. This one has a little exclamation point next to it, the seller 2, just so you know, because it doesn't have an email address in there. So it'll let you know. If you want to fix it, you just click on it, you type in their email address, it fixes it. Okay, so here, it assigned my signatures already. It's having problems with the other ones that aren't like, that can be changed depending on who this is with. I don't know why it doesn't have the seller's names there in the text overflow. So to assign a signature like seller 1 and seller 2, we just come over here to tools. We select from the drop down seller 1. Here's your tutorial on the signing. You just drag it over here. Boom. You can leave the date there. Sometimes I move it over to the date line, and we need seller 1 and seller 2 there. And they're different colors so that you know you've got the right signature blocks everywhere. Okay, if we had assigned the wrong seller name, you could click on this box. You could come up here and you could go, oh, that was supposed to be seller 3. See, now it changes to purple. So that's how you change those if you assign. You don't have to delete and redo it. We just switch it. And then also too, if you want it, it's going to date stamp it. If you want it time stamped, we just select that. Now it's going to put the date and the time on there. If we hit the name block, it's going to print their name underneath their signature line. So there's a lot of really cool things. Or if it's an optional one, we could go there, and now it's optional versus required. Okay, if we want to take the dates off, we just remove them that way. Okay, you can also adjust the size either by clicking the box here, or you can adjust the size here on this scale as well. So that's how you mess with those. But the really cool thing that is here, which is where I was headed, is we're gonna click out of that signature block. Okay, so we could come down here to seller 3, and we could say, hey, we need them to initial the pages. And then you're going to be like, do you want a small, medium, or large? Do you want it left, center, or right, the top of document or bottom? So maybe I want them all on the right at the bottom of the document. And the people who need to initial are seller 3 and seller 4. And I need them to initial the modification of listing all pages and the cancellation of listing all pages. I don't need them to initial the additional signature because they're signing that. And then I hit place initials. And now it's automatically placed those initials on every single page. DocuSign, I have not found a way to let you do this, but this one will. So it added those signatures there. It added it on the text addendum, overflow addendum. It did not put it on this one because we didn't need it on this one. Okay, but here is where, like, right, it's so cool that they have that feature on there. So I just wanted to point that out to answer your question, Anastasia, of if we need to initial every page. Technically, legally, no. For our compliance purposes, we like them to be initialed, and that's the easiest way to get it done is through AuthentiSign on your zip forms. You just click that initial pages, you select who needs to initial, what documents need to be initialed, and the pages that do, and it just does it for you. Magic.
You never cease to amaze me. Brilliant.
The systems never cease to amaze me. Like I said, I just found that one probably maybe a month ago. Figured out that it had that option there, and it's just the coolest thing ever, I think.
I needed that
Coolest
like
thing.
last week when I had to put 3 additional people.
Yep. Now you know. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, comments before we wrap up for today?
Not for me, man.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you got some benefit out of that. Not only the forms, but how to kind of navigate the new signing or the new editing software, as well as how to navigate through AuthentiSign, which again is the free option for the signing software through ZipForm. So I think it's a great free option. It's got some great features. They've really enhanced it. It didn't used to be as cool, but now it's cooler than the paid version. So there you go. All right. Have a great